G'day fellas, and welcome to a tier list video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at all 8 civilizations and seeing where they sit inside a tier list. Keep in mind, this is a subjective list. Yours might look different. You may disagree with aspects of mine, but that is perfectly okay. That is why a tier list exists, because it's a subjective thing. But we're going to be diving into this. We're going to be talking about the best civs first, and then we're going to be heading down. And most importantly, we're going to be talking about this bad boy right here. It is the brand new, the Holy Roman Empire. He is all buffed up, and he is looking potentially very, very strong. But we will wait, we will see. First coming in on the list, it is going to be the English. English sitting safely in the S tier. A civilization which is not so much seen a hotly contested pick in the current tournaments, but on the ladder, it is an incredibly strong pick. Basically a viable pick on every single map, versatile in all matchups, capable of pulling off multiple different strategies. You don't know whether you're going to get the classic, whether you're going to get, that classic 7 vills on sheep, 3 vills on gold into a quick age up. We saw Beastie Cutie do that into a second town center. That's strategy 1. Strategy number 2, obviously, get those early wheelbarrows out, plenty of farms out, lots of good stuff like that. Of course, they like to play feudal, they like to play castle, and in the event they get to imperial, well, you guys know what happens then. They are a very strong civilization, and they've got a lot of favorable matchups. They've got a couple of ones that are a little bit difficult, but for the most part, a very strong civilization, very difficult to be aggressive against the English in the early game. Next civilization that we are going to be talking about coming up, it is going to be the French. Once again, French are, they're similar to the English in that they are versatile, and I think that's probably the way that this tier list sort of changes is depending on the versatility of a civilization, and that's something that we're obviously going to be talking about quite a bit with the Holy Roman Empire coming up. But we'll talk about the French now because that's what we're up to. But obviously the French have got a lot of different strategies that they can employ. We've seen 2 TC coming out of them. We've seen 3 TC coming out of them. We've seen their fast castles. Their 2-knight semi-fast castle, heavy feudal, 2 TCs into fast castle, 2 TCs into, it's just a civilization. It's got that has so many good matchups. That's the big thing. And good matchups, or at least decent matchups, against the top ranked civs at the moment, or the top tier civs at the moment. The most picked ones, obviously, it's got a pretty decent matchup against the English. Got those knights in the second age, which can be a little bit pesky to deal with. Obviously, raids coming in non-stop, and they can go for a pretty much almost guaranteed second town center and look to fend off any sort of English aggression. It's one of the few civilizations that can actually go for basically a fast second town center against the English and not actually get destroyed by the English, just because they are able to keep up with the production. But the French are an incredibly strong civilization. I'm definitely a huge fan of them. I think in the current meta, they are a safe pick on almost every single map. And that's obviously a theme that we see between both of these civilizations. Obviously, there's exceptions to that. Like, you probably wouldn't pick the French on Hill and Dale. You would probably go for a bit more, defensive, whether you want to go like Holy Roman Empire, whether you want to go English, whether you want to go Chinese. That can work there. But other than that, they're pretty much safe on every single other map. Next civilization coming up, you guessed it, it is correct, it is the Holy Roman Empire, and it is sitting in the A tier. That's right, I talked about the fact that this could potentially be an S tier Holy Roman Empire. I think it still might be the case, but I think people still got to work it out. We're obviously in early days of the brand new patch, and that's the thing, but already we're starting to see new build orders developing, and I think this is largely, what I was talking about earlier, with the fact that these 2 civs sit in S tier. In the A tier, we've got the Holy Roman Empire. Think about the strategies that they can do now. They can do so many crazy things now. It's absolutely wild. 2 town centers. There's a 2 town center build order at the moment that's going down with your second town center literally getting dropped down at 445. This is a crazy build order. So we're seeing 2 town center fast castle. We're seeing 2 town center feudal plays. We're seeing Burgrave Palace. We're seeing Minework Palaces sometimes coming out. It's kind of rare. Obviously, there was that big thread on Reddit about it, and a lot of people just sort of jumped on the Arkan Chapel hype train. I think at the moment, the Holy Roman Empire is in such a great position because that early prelate really speeds up their early game, and that's where they were hurting the most. It means that they've basically got a free villager for the rest of the game, which is going to be gathering resources, but then there's just so much more to it, because at the very beginning of the game, all of your villagers are immediately buffed up. So you've immediately got like huge, tanky, beefy villagers that you don't have to wait for your, because typically you would go prelate into scout. Sometimes you did go scout into prelate depending on the matchup, but it was like you had to wait a fair bit of time for that prelate to come out and to start buffing up, but you don't have to anymore. So we start to see these ludicrous displays from the Holy Roman Empire. My personal favorite is 2TC. I think 2TC with Holy Roman Empire is incredibly smart, primarily because you can just emergency repair the second town center. You know, normally a civilization would be dying. Like, let's say an English ram rushes you. If you're playing the Chinese, how do you defend against that? Well, you're going to try and use horsemen. That's going to be a big thing that you're going to try and do. And you're going to try and use Chokunu as well, if possible. But the problem that you're going to have is that the battering rams are just, they're like ticking time bombs working on that second town center. And with the Holy Roman Empire, you buy yourself so much more time because of that emergency repair ability. So much more time. And that's really what makes them so strong, because now it means that in that matchup, Holy Roman Empire versus the English says, well, okay, I might as well just fast castle here. And that's exactly what the Holy Roman Empire wants to do. Goes so he can do 2 town center into fast castle. We're starting to see it come out a little bit more. Burgrave Palace obviously looking like a really strong landmark all of a sudden. There is some crazy production levels that come out of that bad boy. But yeah, that is going to be the Holy Roman Empire. Next civilization that is going to be sitting in the A tier, it is going to be the Mongols. Now, we did see the Mongols nerfed recently, but at the same time also buffed. Nerfed because of that YAM aura network speed. I said 4 words there. I don't think they were necessarily in the right order, but 4 words. But yeah, so essentially that was the biggest nerf that we saw for the Mongols, and this kind of changes their identity, because the Mongol are a civilization. Obviously they don't get walls, and so it means that they need to use their YAM network to speed up their units to try and defend against any potential counterattacks, that sort of thing. But what it means also is that if you've got outposts all around the map, that you're not able to encroach upon your enemy's base at lightning speed and then duck out at lightning speed, because we do see that because of the YAM network was lingering. It would mean that your lancers could come in, hit villages, and sprint out, and there was nothing that your enemy could do to defend it. Obviously, if you've got spears on the wood line, then that's fine. But other than that, it was very difficult to defend, to catch. But now, all of a sudden, if you want to have that YAM network in your enemy's base, you're probably going to have to bring up the deer stones, or you're going to have to extend out those outposts even further than what you could before. But the Mongols, they're another civilization that's very versatile. Obviously, we see tower rushes come out, and it's not always a tower rush. It might be a tower... I'm trying to think of like a tower slow. Like we see towers coming out all the time with the Mongols. People just love to put towers like 6 minutes, 7 minutes down on resources. It doesn't have to be a rush. It just has to be annoying, and that's what they are, because the Mongols always have that free trickle of stone coming in. It makes it so easy to get those emplacements. They don't even need to think about it, and it's just, you know, you drop down that outpost and you start being annoying. But Mongols, obviously, still a very versatile civ, a great civilization, reliant on making sure that they dish out a fair amount of punishment to their enemy. That is the real key here for the Mongols in a lot of these matchups, and it means that they have some difficult ones to deal with. But we'll move on to our next civilization. Now, I was throwing up on as to whether this civilization should belong in the A tier or the B tier. I'm still somewhat undecided. It is the Delhi Sultanate. I'm kind of leaning towards A tier. And the only reason why is because of that one game that Beastie Cutie played up against, I want to say it was Puppy Paw, Abbasid Dynasty versus Delhi on Lipany, where scholars just look crazy with their healing. And because that is still a very serious threat against a lot of civilizations. 10 scholars and 7 tower elephants. How do you stop that without going imperial? It is very, very difficult to stop, just because of how good that the scholars being cheaper, as well as the Delhi getting pretty decent healing rates on their buffed up scholars. But at the moment, it's kind of like balancing out between the A tier and the B tier, but we're living in the A tier at the moment, even though we've got, it's a very top-ended, thing here that we've got. You know what? We're going to bring it down. We'll bring it down to the B tier. Nah, I can't, man. I can't. It's one of those tough ones. So the Delhi, they've got they've got a lot of good matchups, but they also have a lot of bad maps, and that's something to remember. Like, there's a lot of maps that you just can't play the Delhi on. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of tournaments, then it's great for a pocket pick on certain maps. If you're looking at it from the perspective of laddering and you want to main a civilization, the Delhi's a civilization that's probably a little bit tougher because there are some bad maps out there for you. Most notably, Mongolian Heights, you would think is a pretty decent Delhi map, not the case. And I mean, there's a couple of other ones out there as well, but Delhi are a civilization that obviously is very reliant on its power spikes and its timings, and there seems to be more and more civilizations that are becoming aware of that, know how to counter it, how to deal with it, and as a result, it means that they're starting to lose power, starting to lose potency. We're seeing, as mentioned before, a lot of big build orders coming out of these two civs at the top, which reduce the power significantly of the Delhi because these are obviously the most played civilizations. But at the moment, the Delhi, they don't seem to be as strong as they used to be. They don't seem to be as hotly contested as they used to be. So I'm curious to see where they come up this weekend. Obviously, we've got Golden League coming up this weekend with the brand new balance patch. I'm looking forward to seeing whether Delhi gets picked. I'm looking forward to seeing whether Delhi gets picked as well. Yeah, I've got them sitting in the B tier at the moment. Next civilization also going to be sitting in the B tier. It is going to be the Rus. The Rus are a civilization that is, honestly, it's quite a strong civilization given the right circumstances. So it's obviously really, really good on high view. The Rus love high view, and part of the reason why high view is such a good map for Rus, obviously you've got the Gaia there, but the big thing for me is that it's very hard to scout the Rus. You don't know what they're doing because they could be doing 2 town centers, they could be doing fast castle, they could be doing feudal all in, they could be going 2 town center off the board, they could be going all in off the board, they could not be taking the board. There's so many different things that they can be doing, and it makes it even harder to scout them on high view because there's so many stupid little places that they can stick that damn town center. You just don't know. Are they on 2 town centers? Are they on 1? It's hard to know. But the Rus are a civilization that continues to be a civilization that's probably less picked on normal maps. You don't really see them out that much. Obviously quite good on King of the Hill. Not that that is in the ranked pool at the moment, but they do have some pretty decent matchups as well. Once they do get to the late game, they're a force to be reckoned with. Their siege as well as their Streltsy, obviously 2 insane parts of it. We've seen the Horse Archer really coming out in strength recently. We've seen a lot of Horse Archer play coming out from the Rus, but at the moment they just seem to be a little bit predictable in that regard. Obviously, you're very easy to scout out the Rus and know exactly what they're up to, and as a result, it makes it less viable for you to pick them. And that's really what it comes down to. You know, we talked about that a bit earlier about predictability of strategy. You know, the English, you can't predict this. The French, you can't predict this. The Holy Roman Empire, you can't predict these guys anymore. Mongols, unpredictable. The Delhi, very predictable. I know what the Delhi are going to do 99% of the time, but because of their strength, they're still a very solid B tier. You know, whether it's a feudal all-in or it's an age 3 timing, it's one of the two. That is going to be it. You're not going to see, you're very rarely going to see a Delhi make a second town center. Very rarely are you going to see a Delhi go Imperial. You know, the meta obviously continues to develop. Next up, the civilization that is coming in is the Chinese. I'm going to be chucking it in the C tier. Another civilization that's very predictable. You kind of know what the Chinese are going to do, but that's not to say that the Chinese are one-dimensional. There's a lot of different ways that you can play China. You've got 1 TC Song, you've got 2 TC Song, 3 TC Song, yeah, you know it, I love it. But you've got, you know, fast castling, you can try and play feudal with the Chokunu. It becomes a very careful balancing act as to how much you can greed with China and not die. That is really the trick to playing China, and in that, it is very easy to determine what a Chinese player is going to do. They're typically going to be trying to be as greedy as possible. Very rarely do you see a Chinese player going all in a feudal ram Chokunu push style thing. But China as a civilization, it's got some difficult matchups, most notably the Holy Roman Empire, which is a civilization that has recently started becoming a lot more prominent on the ladder. In addition to that, the English are a difficult matchup for China as well. And Delhi, which is a civilization that has lost a lot of favor recently, is also a hard matchup. But the Chinese are a civilization that takes control in the late game, and often these civilizations stop you from getting there. So obviously, the English have got so many different ways. They're typically going to be sitting in the driver's seat. Normally up against the English, you're going to have to play 1 town center until they get to castle, in which case you can try and look to do damage, try and take relics, and then try and get that second town center down yourself. But you know, that's on the condition that they are doing their standard, English fast castle sort of build order. There's so many different variables and so many different factors, and the English are a great civilization up against the Chinese, but China at the moment sitting in C tier, a strong civilization on specific maps, a strong civ in specific matchups, but not a strong civilization overall, in my opinion. Finally, it is the Abbasid dynasty, unfortunately going to be sitting down here in the D tier. I know that they did get that recent buff, where they're looking a little bit better in their castle age timings, just simply because they can get in their their preservation of knowledge a little bit sooner than other civilizations can get it. A little bit sooner than what they used to be able to get it. Let's just put it that way, so they can get their upgrades sooner, because it reduces the price of the upgrade, so it takes less time to research that tech, and now you can get those upgrades in sooner. You don't have to wait for it. So that is always one of the great things to look at it, but once again, they're very predictable. I always know if I'm playing up against an Abbasid dynasty player on any one of these civs, they're going to be looking for 2 town centers. If I play up against them as China, they're looking for 3 town centers. And I scout their stone, and then I just counter them. It's very, very simple playing up against the Abbasid dynasty. They are a predictable civilization, and if I know what beats them, and I can execute it, then obviously I just do that. And that's what makes it so hard playing the Abbasid dynasty, because they do have a lot of difficult matchups. Obviously, the English going up against the Abbasid dynasty, it is a very difficult civilization to deal with, just simply because of that ram timing push that comes in. And I know a lot of people joke about, I mean, like, if you're dying to ram rushes in 2022, like the problem the problem is not the civ, the problem is you. But in all fairness, the English civilization, it is a very potent civ when it comes to ram rushing, and the Abbasid dynasty don't really have a lot of tools to defend against those ram rushes, especially from the English, and that's part of the reason why it sits down here in the D tier. So that is the tier list. What are your thoughts about this? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Would have you changed some things? I suspect some people would have even looked to put the HRE in the S tier. I suspect that we might see it move up there over the next weekend. I really wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing it coming out a lot more on maps where it is. I think it's probably even going to be a solid pick even on open maps. Honestly, 2 town center play, it just seems very difficult to stop. But we'll be covering that in quite a few more videos. We're going to be focusing a lot on the Holy Roman Empire this weekend, in the lead up to Golden League. But fellas, thank you for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one, and enjoy gaming, have a blast, and thank you.